prayer. The Lord be with you. And also with you. Let us pray. Good and gracious God, we give you thanks for this beautiful morning in this place, for this time to gather together to hear about so many different ways that you have called your people together to serve, especially the poor, the last, the lost, the little, those in need. We give you thanks for the ministry of Love Inc. and the work that they do in our community. We give you thanks for the Plaster House and places like it where folks who are recovering can get the care that they need and be strengthened for their lives. We give you thanks for gathering us this morning. Be with us and inspire us to love you and to love our neighbors as ourselves. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Go Rob!
We'll do the video in a little bit.
Yeah, let me know when.
Absolutely. So, a woman who was sold at 4 and called the dog kennel that she was kept in her first apartment reached out for help. She was in a desperate place and didn't know how to get help. But she called the Loving Connection Center and said, I need your help, but I don't want any of that Christian stuff. Just please give me some help. So volunteer after volunteer entered into her life and bringing her material help, quieting the crisis in her life, and also making relationships along the way. And a woman had just came back from doing a 1-year certificate at a Bible college, and she was never told not to do the Christian stuff. So she was sent over there and spent some time praying with her. And at the end of that time, she called up and said, I didn't know that was that Christian stuff. Maybe I do want some of that. A group of ladies and their husbands had wrapped around her, and they celebrated in her 4th decade of life, her very first birthday party, her very first Christmas, her very first of everything that year. When the 2nd year came around, did it again. And she wrote a text that I should have brought to read to you, but in essence it said, the first year was like a big show. She didn't know if it was going to be real, but the 2nd year was real. She didn't get abandoned. She wasn't kicked to the curb. She came into the Loving building and she wanted to see behind the curtain the people that were helping her. And she met me, and I'm not the one that was helping her, but she can't look at men. And so she was looking down at the ground. And I said, it's great to meet you. You're, just so you're aware, you're an image bearer of God and loved by God and loved by us, and you're worthy of all the help we can give you. And she started crying and said, that's messed up. I said, no, that's the truth. Later on, she gave her first voluntary hug to a man who was the husband of one of the volunteers that had been walking alongside her since the beginning. Love Inc. is built on a clearinghouse model. We have a call center where we receive calls from help all year long. We've averaged 500 calls per month. And what happens then is that we get to know the people, get to find out where they've been, where they are now, what they're doing, what they've done, what works, what didn't work. They sign a release of information so we can advocate on their behalf. When I say we, I mean you. It's all done through the volunteers from the partner churches. Staff does the logistics and the counseling and the ministering to you. All you get to be the hands and feet of Christ. It's all volunteers that are manning the phones. It's all volunteers that are mobilized to enter into lives. But what we want to do is when you ask for that surface thing, like, I need a tank of gas, we know that the tank of gas isn't going to solve anything, because they'll drive around the block enough and they'll run out of gas and they'll have miles on their car, but they're still in the same situation. So what we need to do is define what that ball of yuck is underneath the surface that's keeping them back from thriving. And then that ball of yuck is what's overwhelming to them, so we pull it into manageable chunks. And one might be something that a nonprofit specializes in. So we call in Haven for a abusive situation, or Family Promise for a homeless family. And we refer back and forth to be able to come alongside together and resolve those different aspects. And then what's left, we bring you in. Because your gifts and talents are exactly what's needed to resolve the other things. And it may just be the caring ministry of Christ, the hope, the love, and walking alongside of them as they learn how to navigate the world. For the woman that I talked about, we're still in a relationship with her, years later. We just sent a group of high school girls over to clean her apartment and help her out. She was terrified because she knew that high school girls were going to judge her terribly, in her opinion. Instead, they went and loved on her. And afterwards, she reported back that it was an amazing experience, and they were all bright lights, and brought her something that she never expected. And that was amazing. There was a single father that showed up at our doorstep. He wanted a car. So one of the things we do is a budget analysis, not because they have to financially qualify for anything, but so that we can see what in the community they would qualify for that they're not already receiving. And in this case, can we give them a vehicle without sinking them further? And there's no way that he could have received a car. So we went through the classes. We have faith and finance class. At the time we had a conflict resolution class. We have 2 trauma classes, because it's amazing how many people have gone through trauma. And we also have a Love Your Kitchen, a cooking class. So the gentleman could not, we couldn't in good conscience give him a car. So he went through the faith and finance class, and I love the way God works, because I happen to be there. I don't attend the classes. It's other staff members and scores of volunteers. But I happened to check in that night when he was introducing me to his daughter, and the daughter said, "Can we stop for ice cream on the way home?" And he said, "Well, honey, if we do, we only have $20 left this month, and if we do, all we'll have left is whatever that $20 minus that ice cream." Wait a minute, I've never said that before. And it was like, wow, that's great. And he made all these changes and he got the car. And they said, "The car's too nice for me, give it to someone that deserves it." I said, "No, you deserve it." And he said, "But all I want the car for is to be able to drive my daughter to school when it rains, or when it snows, or maybe to go to a doctor appointment, or maybe to drive to the park." And then I had to cry. Imagine worrying about that. I can't fathom that. But he had another daughter that he was estranged from, and he wanted to know how he'd get back in the relationship with her, so he went through the resolving everyday conflict. And he learned that when you say an apology, it's not, "I'm sorry you feel that way." It actually involves being sorry and changing your behavior. And he reunited with his other daughter. But his teen daughter confessed that his cooking was horrible. And she wouldn't even eat what he dumped out of a can. So we went through the Love Your Kitchen class. And now, years later, he went through all of our classes. His teen daughter went with him. And his life has changed dramatically because of the volunteers that went along with him. Because you see in the classes what happens is you get a fellowship meal provided by life groups a lot of times. So they come in, they serve it, they get to interact, they get to love on the people that are there, and then they depart, and the kids go to childcare if it's appropriate, and then the parents go to the classes. Everyone in the class is volunteers again. We pair them up one by one, so every student has a mentor. The only one that doesn't work with is trauma. We just have mentors in small groups, because pairing one by one, if you mess that up, that would be rough. And so we just have that. But being able to walk alongside of them, a lot of times they become lifelong friends. And when I go to attend their churches, I see them in the pews, which is an amazing thing. But I'm here today to invite you to be part of any of that. And if Ben is going to, he and I are taking a class together. So I had to quiz him on why he has a small B. I told him he could graduate to the Capitol. But what he's passing around is a sheet if you would like to learn more. If you want, we could always come back here and do this again. It would be a little longer, and I'd tell you how we go into it. But there are, your Love in the Name of Christ ministry last year met over 28,000 needs. The phones are ringing off the hook. We have 500, 700 calls per month. We average being able to help about 250 some families every month. And that's not to say that the others don't get help, but you don't get to resolve it all in a month. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes it's much longer. You have to really walk alongside of them, because, as I said, that ball of yuck is a lot more intense. If you were to choose to come into the Loving building and work at the call centers, we would work alongside of you and try to help you process that experience. But let's, if we could, I'll have you watch the video and then I'll close up. But however you would like to, if you want to exercise your faith in a tangible way in the community, we would be one option you could do so. We have, if you come for a tour, you'll see in our, we have 2 call centers, and if you see the amount of files, every file represents an individual or family, and there are many, many, many of them that are in play. And it's really amazing to be able to bring that light, love, and hope, of Christ to so many. But this is the 1,000-word part, so I can save a few. The loving staff don't help anyone, except you, to be able to enter into those real opportunities. Everything is done through the churches. And when you would serve, you would say who you are from this church, a partner of Love Inc. Actually, you don't say Love Inc., you say Love in the Name of Christ. Because it puts Christ right out on the table, 2 times in this case. And then that's a starting point. And then as they ask you more, you share your faith, you invite them in, and you demonstrate your faith. We don't want to serve a slice of the community. We want to serve everyone. Anyone that reaches out for help, we serve them right where they are without judgment. And we invite you in to do the same. If you're interested in learning more, there's no real commitment other than to learn more. But if you're interested in doing so, we would love to talk to you about it.
So Freya and I were invited to do an immersion trip through the Plaster House. Password, please. Cute. So Freya and I were invited to do what was called an immersion trip to a place called the Plaster House, which is very special, and you'll learn about here in short order. In June and July of this past summer. And the Plaster House is in Tanzania, which is in East Africa. It is an extension of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Tanzania, and was started I'm going ahead on some slides here so we can just get into Freja time, but was initiated by the work of the late Dr. Mark Jacobson, who was an ELCA Lutheran medical missionary who arrived in Tanzania in 1985 and quickly understood that Arusha needed a more organized place for medical care, and through local partnership with physicians on the ground there, developed the first hospital in that area, Celian, which Barb has spent months, years, a couple of years at. Thereafter, a new medical center, Arusha Lutheran Medical Center, was developed, and as the surgical burden, I would say, of care came to light. Oh. Where's my laser pointer? Middle. Oh.
It doesn't show up because it's a screen.
Okay. It doesn't show because it's a screen. Thanks. Do you have to,
Press it forward.
where do I point the thing when I push the arrow? This is amazing. Okay, so very quickly, Tanzania is sort of enjoys a political stability that is unique across the continent. And I say enjoys because it's complex, but the things that are unique about Tanzania, geographically, it is the home of Mount Kilimanjaro, which means that most of its income comes from Western travelers arriving to hike Mount Kili or go into the Great Rift Valley for safari, where the Serengeti plains lie, and the Ngorongoro crater area where there's beautiful, lush wildlife. So as two Westerners arriving in Tanzania, the questions were, oh, are you hiking Kili? Nope. Oh, are you going on safari? Nope. What are you doing here? Right? And Tanzania is broken up into many, many, many tribes, but through the colonialization, first of it being German East Africa, 1890s to 1920s, then it becoming a British colonial territory, and then it finally getting released into local hands. The political powers that be in the 1960s decided, we are going to take the language of Swahili, and my understanding is it was really sort of this mother language that took a lot of the aspects of local tribal languages, and they really tried to suppress tribal identities in the name of kind of universal language and culture. And there's a critique of that process too, but what it has offered is really more of a national identity than a tribal identity, which is unique to a lot of space around there. So Freya and I knew a little bit of Swahili arriving, and that provided its own unique challenges, but why don't you go ahead and click next. So our travels were June 26th through July 9th. It was 6 US teams. That picture is 6 US teams plus a 20-something US like counselor. 20, not 20-something, 20. And our parents. Freya and I were the only Lutherans, and notably, like Plaster House's identity, its history is rooted in Lutheran tradition, but really its identity in that place in space and in the U.S. is not necessarily one of Lutheran. Freya, do you want to talk a little bit about this being an immersion trip rather than a service trip? Or not? Okay. It's actually kind of a cool segue. I heard Rob talk a lot about walking alongside, walking with, right? And this shift in notion about what's service, what's the immersion, what's accompaniment. And Westerners have done a lot of harm in areas in the name of service, showing up, swooping in. Some of you probably heard of the term white savior complex. And Plaster House has a real awareness and caution around that, because what they're doing is locally run, it's organic, and they're doing it because they understand the needs of the local culture. We arrive not with service, but with presence. And so the goal was for these teens, to become immersed in this place and space and offer presence and play, and lots of humor, but for it to be this mutual experience for these kids getting a dose of like fresh, interesting, novel presence, and for the US teens to really learn a whole lot about themselves and about being a local citizen. Okay. Thanks. Sure. Okay, so Freya, do you want to talk a little bit about the structure of the trip? She doesn't know all the photos that are in this slideshow. We just talk about the structure of the trip.
Okay. So we spent 2 weeks there, and upon arrival, we had a day of orientation where we attempted to learn more Swahili, and we got to know the group because it kind of functioned like a little family. Like everyone has their own needs, but also it's a group trip. We have to accommodate everyone. So once we got settled in, we spent 4 days at the Plaster house, going there for about 4 to 5 hours every morning, and then taking some sort of adventure in the afternoon. The first day you can see here, we went to a place called Snake Park. All sorts of fun, crazy, scary things there. And then we continued those kind of experiences, which weren't the main focus of the trip, but we got to get a little more immersed in the local culture rather than just doing like the usual tourist things. And we had 2 guides, Gloria and Jimmy, who were locals, I believe. They both grew up in Arusha, which is where we were based the entire trip, and they got to kind of do this entire process with us because they hadn't been to the Plaster house before either, but obviously they knew what their homelands were like.
But Freya, you're in a stocking cap. You were in Africa. How is that possible?
Yeah, so basically Arusha is between Mount Kilimanjaro and a mountain called Meru. And these are both 2 huge volcanoes, which haven't really recently erupted at all, but since it's at such high elevation, it gets very cold, and it's actually pretty far south of the equator, I mean, further than you might expect.
A few hundred kilometers at least.
Yeah, and so it was mostly in the 60s our entire trip, and it got rainy and obviously very humid. So yeah, it was funny because everyone's like, oh, you're going to Africa, and I come back pale, and they're like, where were you? Africa.
I already kind of went over this. I just wanted to give a nod to Dr. Mark Jacobson, who died this past year from brain cancer. He was in his mid-60s. He and Linda had made Tanzania their home, and he's part of the reason why healthcare in Tanzania is assumed to be Lutheran originating, right? Like, and he worked to Direct Selling Hospital, was a driving force in Arusha Medical Center, and then in 2014, along with Sarah, the current director of Plaster House, made Plaster House a reality.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to talk about the history?
Yeah, sure. So the reason the inception of the Plaster House idea came to be was that even in the mid-2000s, surgical groups from the US would arrive with Western surgeons who would sort of fix pediatric orthopedic problems in this area. And Freya, I'm going to have you talk about the things that we saw, the pathologies we saw. But again, sort of this savior complex, right, where we don't understand the setting in which we're giving care or arriving in. These surgeons would come, they would fix club foot, they would fix cleft palate, and then they would go home to Denver, and these children would return home to their villages. And oftentimes what would happen is these children would be put in plaster casts for their club foot. They would go home to live in bomas, which are, mud floor, dung wall type things, often sleeping with baby goats and baby cows, and their plaster would get bug infested, and the families wouldn't understand that there was an infection underlying the plaster. And then these kids would get really sick, they'd come back and they would require amputations.
And
Okay, so a lot of you might be asking, what is Plaster House? It's obviously a surgical center of some sort, but what they specialize in is helping to heal kids with like pediatric physical disabilities that can be corrected or healed through surgery and recovery. They specialize in cleft palate and lip, clubfoot, burn scars and contractures, and then fluorosis. Fluorosis is a condition where the fluoride content is so high in the water that their bones start to like decay and then start deforming, and so they get bowed legs or their spine might move. It looks like severe scoliosis, but it's just because this content is so high, because the government isn't able to provide proper filtration for everyone, and also it's between Kilimanjaro and Meru, both of which are volcanoes, so the fluoride content is higher with the geothermal features, and no one really understands that, but all of a sudden these kids can't walk and they have to come get surgery. So, these are some of my friends I made. The little girl you see in these 3 pictures is named Amina, and she was my best bud there. Amina's a 3-year-old who had a big burn on her left foot that eventually turned into a stump because her leg fell into a fire when she was a baby, and all her toes.
they cook inside of the fire is inside of this like small structure that would fit in this area.
Yeah.
And then there's a ongoing burning fire in the middle.
Yeah, and so she fell into the fire, and her leg got caught, and they probably didn't notice for a few minutes, and then they saved her. But at that point, like all her toes had come off, it damaged all her tissue up to her knee, and she couldn't really walk on it. But since there's not really like education on how you deal with these sorts of incidents, they ended up wrapping her foot, and so rather than allowing the tissue to like heal and for her foot to like grow back so she could walk on it, the tissue like conforms with these like fabrics and sometimes starts to get its own deformities. And so she had a correction that was a tissue reconstruction, and then they helped to flatten out her stump foot so that she could relearn to walk on
You
it.
can kind of see in that top left photo, her left leg, you can see that it's been sort of, you can't keep it's a screen.
Outside of the surgery, a lot of these kids are coming from rural villages
I have a slide that keeps on.
or like the middle of town where there isn't wide access to healthcare, and so they have outreach programs where they're either like volunteers or mamas at the house or people who have come visit the Plaster House and are able to be educated about this can go out and be like, I see this kid who definitely needs help, and they can talk, and the Plaster House will provide all the care from transportation to pre and post-op as well as the surgery. But the process of doing that is obviously a lot of work and takes months. So the families are asked to buy in some, because what would happen if they were just, when they were giving them all the health care they needed, is there's no incentive to bring your child back to make sure they're healing properly, or to like go back to make sure their nutrition is aiding what they need to recover. And so usually I believe the families pay about 3% of the overall cost.
Do you remember what the overall cost?
And crazily enough, from the beginning of pre-op, which can be up to 8 weeks, I believe.
And what do they do during that pre-op time? What's the goal of that time?
Sometimes they'll do like, what is it called?
Well, it's really like, it's nutritional.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Most of it is nutritional stuff so that their bones are strong enough and they like regain strength and their muscles can grow and all sorts of things can heal.
Increased protein.
And so yeah, and they get higher protein, higher greens, to help with like hemoglobin, iron, and all sorts of things. And then they also start on like speech therapy for a lot of kids who have cleft lip and cleft palate. And then once the surgery is over, they kind of reverse that process. What was I saying?
The cost.
Sweet. Okay, So that entire process, which can be like up to 3 months, costs $850 per kid.
Does that include the surgical fee, Freja?
Yeah. So, some pretty cool stuff is going on there, and they've been able to partner with a hospital, so they can bring the kids directly from the living quarters down and get their surgery and back up within a few hours or a few days, depending on the case.
Tell me a little bit about the culture of the woman in the photo.
Okay, so a lot of these kids come from Maasai land, which Maasai is one of the largest tribes in Tanzania as well as Kenya, and they're a nomadic tribe, so they will freely go in between these countries, and they have what they call Maasai land, which isn't really a set boundary place or anything, but it's mostly out in these open plains, and they live in these bomas, and they have their own culture, which is very beautiful and it's very unique to them. But a lot of these kids are born with some sort of physical disability, and everyone's like, whoa, what's going on with them? God didn't make people to look like this.
Strong shame culture.
There's a lot of stigma around it, and so some of these kids will just try and be as normal as they can, but have physical prohibitions. And some of these kids are so shameful to the family that they're literally hidden in the boma until there's an outreach program that can get them the help they need. And so without the proper education, there's not as many steps that can be taken as quickly. So another big part of it is the outreach, not only helping to find people and get them help, but to find people and educate them. And so it's kind of an ongoing process, and we've seen way more kids come into the Plaster House over the past few years.
Well, interestingly too, they're trying to train safari drivers. So safari drivers are they're sort of kind of interestingly seen as pillars in their community. Oftentimes they're Maasai men who then go to get a certification to be safari guides, safari drivers. And they're going into Maasai land as part of their safari tour, and they're becoming relational with these nomadic villages, and often have an eye towards children with fluorosis, with clubfoot, that are being kind of tucked away within these villages. And so they're trying to bring, drivers to the Plaster House to educate them on what to be looking for, as a way to bring people in from far away. Would you just speak quickly about how that woman up there came to us, literally?
Okay, so we had a 4-day weekend, you can call it. So we were at the Plaster House for 4 days, and then we went to a lodge stay place, I don't know what you would call it, but it's in the middle of Maasai land, and it's run by the Maasai tribe there in that specific area. And so basically, there's a bunch of bomas built there that you stay in, but they're really beautiful and
Western luxuries,
with all sorts of really nice things. But then you're also getting to have these experiences where some traditional beaters will walk 3 hours to come give you a beating lesson, and then the lodge can pay them back and you will pay them, and it's reinvesting in this culture so that they can sustain this place that has brought a lot of jobs and accessibility to needs amongst this village. So
the thing that made me giggle about this, so this was our beading lesson. Freja made the lovely dream catcher necklace along with this grandma. Her name was Leah, L-E-A-H.
So go Leah.
And I said, well, my name is Leah, and she was like, ah! What? It was great. It was this beautiful little moment. But what was funny is, and this was my second time to Tanzania, so I had a sense. I mean, it's a little bit of island time, right? Where nobody's got their Apple Watches, and so they said around 2:30 there will be a beading lesson in the Dream Cave area or whatever, right? And so all of these Western teens and Western moms descend at 2:25 to the Dream Cave where we're going to get a beading lesson, not understanding the women that were coming were on foot from 2 hours away, right? And so at 2:45, a few of the moms get kind of restless, like, we should go talk to the management, you know? And I'm like, oh boy, oh, let's right? Around 3 o'clock, there's like this growing antsiness. People are like, I'm not gonna wait around, right? And probably, like somewhere around like 3:25 maybe, these like 60 to 70-year-old women arrive with grocery bags of beets, dusty, right? We sit down, and then like 20 minutes later, our translator arrives, who also speaks Kasai, whose name was also Leah.
Yeah, there was 4 Leahs at this feeding lesson.
I didn't put the photo in, but we have a photo of all the Leahs. I'm like, yes! It's like a 30% Leah ratio. And so I asked the interpreter, I was like, can you help us understand how these women got here? And she's like, oh, well, they walked. How long did they walk? Oh, yeah, like 2.5 hours, right? To come teach us how to bead. It was like, all right, everybody. You know, like it's this beautiful, we have this time scarcity sense, right? That we bring from Western lives. And really, I could talk in all the ways about how we arrive at a scarcity mindset, and they have an abundance mindset in all of the ways: food, time, service, like again and again and again. And I'm gonna stop. Keep going. But it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
So yeah, I talked to her a fair amount. She was lovely.
Oh, and she loved you.
She was so sweet. It's also very welcoming there. Like, obviously you come here and there's like hospitality for like the literal needs. Like, your running water will be there, and you'll have a nice bed to sleep on. Like, there's accommodations, but there's so much love here, and as Mom said, an abundance mindset, and they'll share everything with you. And Go Leah was like, came up and gave me a big hug, and she's like, oh, and she's like, your mom has the same name as me. It was really great.
And your mom's a really crappy beater. She just would laugh at me. She would see what I was doing. She'd be like, wow! We had no language commonality, but it was very clear I was not doing it correctly. That was amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so moving back into the Plaster house, this is just like one of the mornings we were there, and basically we would come in, the kids would see us, and they'd run up, and we'd just start playing with them. And so this might be helping them in their math notebooks, or doing colorings with them, making paper airplanes, doing puzzles, all sorts of things. A popular one was giving Freja tattoos with markers.
Or a manicure with markers.
Or a manicure, yeah, that stayed for a while. But they were just really excited to like have this experience, and as Mom said, it was like immersion rather than service, because nothing at the Plaster house couldn't have been done without us. Like, we were not needed really, we were just adding on. And so these kids don't get a lot of like, I don't know how you say it, like exposure to like
youthful
like
presence.
Yeah, just older kids who want to interact with them. And
see that you can see one in the background. He's probably 16 or so, playing for her.
Yeah, and so they were just so excited to like have these new people, and we were so excited to be with them. It was a really beautiful connection. So that one who's very excited is named Latifah. She was also one of my buds. She's the sweetest thing. She had fluorosis in both of her legs. So when we came there, she had just gotten out of the bedrooms, and some of these kids, after their surgeries, are in like casts that start at their hips and go to the tip of their toe.
And these are like light fiberglass casts that we would get at urgent care when we, like, these are legit plaster.
It's like cement blocks on your legs. Yeah. And so they can't really move, and they stay in the bedroom for a week or two until they can be upgraded to just like a full leg cast, and they kind of walk around like this. And some of them have these huge clunky walkers that are like a chair but made out of wood, and they're like, boom, and they're like running around. It's so funny and obnoxious and amazing. But like the way they don't really let a disability define them, and we got there, and a lot of times here it's like you notice the disability before the person, or you notice what's prohibiting them from being their fullest self in this way or that way or whatever. But most of these kids, I can't even name what they were there for because it's just a beautiful community.
You have a kid with like missing half a face, and we forget like that was what, like you're like, oh, what was Sassy Pants' name?
Nadia.
We had a girl, she was very sassy. She would come and she'd be like, right at you. You're like, I have no idea what you just said, but you were not pleased about something right now.
Yeah.
So for a while, until we could figure out what her name was, it was Sassy Pants.
Nadia.
Her name was Nadia. Yeah, she had half of her face burned.
Yeah.
And by the end, we're like, well, what was her pathology, right? I'm like, I don't even remember. But
Yeah. She, but they just like to learn, and we really just got to like experience being little kids with them and doing anything else someone would, which was really cool. So that's Nadia.
That's Nadia. She was not yelling at me right there, but she did know that she was about to have a photo taken, and she was like,
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, the kids here, like, it's a young learning environment. Most of them are between 2 and 8, and then there's a few 9 up to 17-year-olds. But there's a little bit of like fear as you get older because we're a bunch of teenagers, and there's also a bunch of teenagers, and they didn't really know how to act with us. But then there's these little kids who are just absolutely off the tracks. They're like enjoying every moment of their life. And a lot of it was because this was a very new environment for them. They had access to clean water, toys, they could talk to whoever they wanted. Other kids looked like them for probably the first time in their life. And so really, whatever you did, they would join you. And one of the things was paper. Like, you don't think about this, but they're talking about how hard it is to come by paper and tape and stuff. And so they would make paper airplanes and throw it at you. The last day, they made paper swords and had a fight. And one of our friends, Zach, he actually lives here. You might know him.
one of the teens on the trip.
Yeah, he was a teen on the trip, and he started making paper swords with them, and they were so excited, they started hitting him, and he had bruises because they were so excited. Other things were like chai time, so every morning at 10.
I have a picture of this.
Every morning at 10, they got chai, which was basically boiled water with a bunch of sugar and ginger.
Down here.
And they would get these huge mugs, like twice the size of those coffee mugs. And Karibu.
Chai time! It's chai time!
Yeah, Karibu means welcome. And so the first morning we didn't really know what this was, but all of a sudden, kids are running up and grabbing your arms and yanking you. They're going, Karibu chai! And it's chaos.
It's like
it's amazing.
welcome to coffee hour.
Yeah.
Like the coffee's ready. Welcome to coffee hour, right? But they're like Karibu chai. And it's super super sweet chai that they make, and you like take a sip and you're like, oh Jesus. Okay.
Yeah, it was really sweet though. Like just really anything would excite them, and there's once again an abundance mindset of like we're going in and we're like these poor kids, like they're in this recovery process and they don't have their family, but like to them it's like amazing, and if they were here anywhere else they'd just be like, wow, I'm here and that's really amazing. So yeah, that one is named Engwanyeti, and she was another little girl who, I don't actually know what her thing was either, but she was just really sweet, and some of them kind of became like little siblings and would just like come up and hug you, or would like make you hold them and carry them around for hours until you literally couldn't hold them anymore. So yeah, just,
Everybody had Crocs on.
it goes
Everybody
to say,
had Crocs on.
yeah, it goes to say like communities like this are built on the relationships you have and the environment you put it in and the perspective everyone has. And so being able to come immerse ourselves in this culture was an incredible experience and life-changing for definitely me, probably Mom. And so I feel really lucky to be able to talk to you guys about this, because the Plaster House is not only an incredible nonprofit, and you guys should definitely go visit someday, but it's also like being able to see other cultures love everyone, like a lot of them were Christian too, and it's like, we love you the way that God would, because nothing's wrong in his eyes. Like, it's so unconditional. So
Rob, what was your phrase? Image bearer? Or, yeah.
Image bearer of God.
We were image bearers and they were image bearers, right?
So that's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Anyone has any questions?
Do you have any interaction now? Like, do you ever see them again?
So one
Contact?
of the hard things is these kids are up here for up to 3 months, but sometimes they'll come in for like post-op checkups or like corrections in their tests, but they're probably not going to be back after a year, and so we don't really have a way to like communicate with those families or anything, and saying goodbye to them was like goodbye. So I'll probably never see them again, but the people at Plaster House who are helping create this environment are there for basically however long they can be, because it's been created to be a community that people stay to help others leave. So yeah, we're in contact with our guides and with our Sarah, who founded the Plaster House, and a few other people. But as far as the kids go, we can't really talk to them or probably see them again. So, which is the beauty and hard part of it all. Okay.
Can you share what the Bozeman house is?
Yeah, I kind of skimmed through that side. So the sort of an asterisk, Gail Getler is, she's on the board of the Plaster House. She doesn't live in Bozeman anymore. She and her husband moved to San Francisco. I don't know if any of y'all have ever had children at Irving or SAP. Mr. Eby. So Gail Geller's Mr. Eby's spouse, but she's a lawyer by trade. And she and her daughter, who was the 20-year-old counselor in that one photo, that was Gail's daughter, basically did a sabbatical to Tanzania in like 2016, and found out about the Plaster House, and she and her daughter basically did an immersion month at the Plaster House, and came back to the U.S. totally changed. And she said, like, I'm gonna dedicate my existence to raising money for the Plaster House here in the U.S. And so she's actually Jewish, and in the years following, she and her community of faith raised a significant number of dollars. And at the time, they were in sort of a capital campaign, the Plaster House was, and so a significant number of Bozeman dollars went to the Plaster House at that time. And so they built a house for volunteers and for like visiting physical therapists, occupational therapists, and it was dubbed the Bozeman House. There is a local trade school that does glass making, and so the local Arusha Trade School made a Bozeman sign for the Bozeman House. And so, I don't know if it's ironic or amusing, but there's no Lutheran dollars necessarily involved in the production of the Bozeman House. And actually, Gail has, she's not here anymore, but we connected maybe a month or so ago. And she really said, like, as the Plaster House continues to become more independent away from the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Tanzania, which unfortunately is, I don't know if the corruption is new, old, or just being exposed, but there's concerns about how dollars are moving through the ELCT, and the ELCA is guarding their funds and how all of that goes, and so the Plaster House is not currently independent of the ELCT. Their ELCT is still this pass-through for dollars coming to the Plaster House, and so Gail has simply said, like, the Plaster House, in order to function independently and not have to worry about dollars coming into ELCT and not coming out to Plaster House, has got to spin off and become independent. And how do we do that and still nod towards our Lutheran roots? And so I think there's sort of a next chapter coming of independent Plaster House fundraising, and I would say the Lutherans of Bozeman are an untapped resource on many levels this far. So yeah, there's conversations happening about that, but that's sort of the story there. So there's this beautiful Bozeman connectivity that I have not necessarily been a participant of until this point. 2 out of the 6 teens were Bozeman teens. Yeah. Yeah, great question.